The most expensive thing about a big car payment is not the interest. It is not the insurance. It is not even the depreciation, bad as that is. The most expensive thing about a big car payment is what it teaches you to call normal. That is the real trap. Once a person accepts that $700, $900, or $1,200 a month for a vehicle is just what adults do, the damage is no longer confined to transportation. It spreads. It changes what feels reasonable, what feels aspirational, what feels deserved, what feels like success, and what kind of financial pain a person is willing to absorb in exchange for a polished machine sitting in the driveway. That is why I do not think the car payment story is really about cars. It is about identity financing. That is the mother line. The modern car payment is not selling transportation. It is selling a social costume, a monthly number small enough to anesthetize your judgment, and a way of borrowing status from the future while pretending the bill is just another utility. That is what people miss. They look at the giant truck or expensive SUV and ask, how can that person afford it? Usually they are asking the wrong question. The better question is, what did that person have to rearrange, postpone, shrink, ignore, or destroy in order to make that payment appear survivable? That question gets you closer to the truth, because most of the people driving these things are not secretly rich. They are not sitting on hidden family money. They are not early Bitcoin legends. They are ordinary workers with ordinary incomes operating inside a financing system that has become extraordinarily good at converting short-term monthly affordability into long-term wealth destruction. That is the system. And like every good system, it works by making the wrong number feel like the right number. This is the first mechanism I want you to understand. I call it monthly payment hypnosis. Walk into a dealership and notice what they never lead with. They do not begin by asking how much total capital you want to destroy over the next 7 years. They do not say, would you like to spend $130,000 all and to end up with an asset worth 15? They do not say, would you like to transfer a huge chunk of your future optionality into a rapidly depreciating status object? Of course they do not. They ask, what monthly payment are you comfortable with? That question sounds innocent. It is not. It is one of the most financially dangerous questions in modern consumer life because it collapses the whole analysis into the smallest emotionally digestible unit. Once the buyer starts thinking in monthly terms, the rest of the machine can go to work, stretch the loan, roll the negative equity, bury the fees, add the warranty, move the numbers around, make the future do more of the suffering so the present can feel surprisingly comfortable. This is how people buy vehicles that would have looked insane if priced honestly in terms of full ownership cost, and the longer the term, the stronger the illusion becomes. A 4-year loan might expose the absurdity too quickly. An 8-year loan hides it in plain sight. That is the second mechanism. I call it time laundering. When you stretch a loan far enough, you do not reduce the cost. You launder it through time, you make it look smaller by making it last longer. The buyer feels relief because the monthly payment dropped, but the system only changed the shape of the pain, not the existence of it. In fact, it often increases the pain. The person says, I can handle $900 a month. What they do not say is, I am volunteering to still be paying for this thing when it is old, worth far less, possibly unreliable, and emotionally stale. That is the real cost, not only more interest, not only more years of being trapped. And once you understand that, you start seeing the third mechanism. Negative equity is not an accident. It is a customer retention strategy. A person finances a vehicle for too long. Depreciation outruns the payoff schedule, and before long they owe more than the vehicle is worth. That sounds like a problem for the buyer. In one sense it is. In another sense, it is a feature for the dealer and lender, because now the buyer is not just choosing the next car, they are dragging a financial corpse from the last one into the next transaction. This is how the cycle becomes self-sustaining. One truck turns into the next, one SUV turns into the next. One bad trade becomes the down payment hole in the next contract. The balance grows even while the person thinks they are upgrading. Upgrading is a very expensive word in America. Most of the time it means spending more to remain emotionally dependent on the same system. That is why I say the car payment trap is not a single bad decision. It is a loop. And loops are dangerous because people stop feeling the first mistake after a while. It becomes their baseline. The payment is just the payment. Insurance is just insurance. Gas is just gas. Repairs are just part of life. Registration, tires, brakes, detailing, warranties, all of it just becomes what it costs. But step back and total it honestly and the number becomes grotesque. This is where the fourth mechanism matters. I call it total cost blindness. People think they bought a $55,000 truck. They did not. They bought a payment stream, insurance stream, fuel stream, maintenance stream, depreciation schedule, and opportunity. Cost catastrophe bundled together under one emotional narrative about success, utility, masculinity, family safety, freedom, or reward. That truck can easily become a six-figure lifestyle decision long before the owner is ready to admit it. And worse, the final resale value rarely carries enough dignity to match the sacrifice. Years later, after all the payments, all the gas, all the premiums, and all the repairs, the owner is left with a machine worth a fraction of what it extracted from their life. That is not asset ownership. That is reverse compounding. And this is exactly why I believe the car payment question is really a wealth question. The fifth mechanism is opportunity incineration. If someone is spending $800 a month on a truck payment, that is not just $800 gone. It is $800 a month that cannot build an emergency fund, cannot kill high-interest debt, cannot fill a Roth, cannot capture a 401k match faster, cannot build a brokerage account, cannot become down payment capital for an income-producing asset, cannot turn into walking away money, and cannot buy back time later. That is the true loss. People love to say, you have to enjoy life. I agree, but we should at least tell the truth about what is being traded away. A large car payment is often a direct tax on future freedom. It delays the investing threshold, it delays career leverage, it delays the moment where work becomes optional, it delays the ability to survive bad luck without debt, and all of that delay is being purchased to sit in traffic with better leather. That is a brutal trade. Now here is where the psychology becomes even more interesting. Why do people defend these payments so fiercely? Why do they get angry when someone questions them? Why does the used reliable car so often get framed as failure, while the expensive financed truck gets framed as responsibility or reward? That is the sixth mechanism. I call it status substitution. A lot of people do not buy the vehicle for the utility. They buy the emotional translation of the vehicle. The truck says they are doing well. The SUV says they are taking care of the family. The luxury badge says their hard work meant something. The big wheels say they are not average. The whole purchase becomes an answer to a deeper question. Am I winning? That is why rational arguments often bounce off. If the vehicle is functioning as a psychological identity support system, then attacking the payment feels to the owner like attacking the self. He does not hear, this is a weak financial decision. He hears, you are not the kind of successful person you think you are. That is why the reactions are so intense. And it is exactly why the industry spends billions showing trucks on mountains and SUVs in cinematic family scenes, instead of showing the actual life of ownership, waiting in line at the service desk, moving money around to cover tires, arguing with the insurer, and wondering whether the extra transmission coverage should go on a credit card. The image is the product. The vehicle is only the delivery mechanism. The seventh mechanism is what I call lifestyle hostage taking. Once the payment is large enough, it does not stay inside the transportation category. It starts reorganizing the entire budget around itself. The person gets the expensive vehicle and then compensates elsewhere. Smaller apartment, no vacation, cheaper food, delayed investing, more overtime side gigs on weekends, skipped dental work, no cushion, no margin. That is the irony. The vehicle meant to symbolize success starts forcing the owner into a more fragile life. I have seen people driving $60,000 or $70,000 trucks while panicking over $300 surprises. That is what the trap looks like in real life. Outwardly expensive, inwardly brittle. This is the great American misunderstanding. Looking rich and being financially strong are not even neighbors. They are different cities. A reliable used car with a healthy investment account, low fixed expenses, and no consumer debt is a much stronger life than an impressive new vehicle financed into the future by someone who cannot survive 6 weeks without income. But strength is quiet. Status is loud. That is why status sells better. Now let us talk about multiple vehicle households, because this is where the absurdity becomes almost elegant in its destructiveness. One expensive payment is bad enough. 2 or 3 turns the household into a private auto finance branch. Mom has the SUV, dad has the truck. There is another vehicle for the teenager or the weekend car or the old one that somehow still has a balance, or the replacement for the replacement. Then the family sits at the kitchen table wondering why everything feels tight despite the income. It feels tight because the household has chosen to convert huge amounts of monthly cash flow into depreciating obligation. That is not a mystery, that is math. And layered on top of it are the hidden satellites of the payment itself. Insurance climbs because the cars are expensive. Fuel climbs because the vehicles are heavy. Repairs climb because the systems are complex. Registration climbs. Accessories show up. Tires are bigger. Everything is premium, priced because the machine was never meant to be cheap to sustain. And yet the owner often fixates only on the loan itself because the loan is the cleanest number. The other costs leak in one by one, which makes them easier to rationalize and harder to total. Honestly, that is deliberate. The eighth mechanism is cost fragmentation. The most dangerous expenses are not always the ones that are highest. They are often the ones that are spread out just enough to hide their cumulative violence. This is why I tell people to calculate transportation as a full ecosystem, not a car note payment, insurance, fuel, maintenance, repairs, registration, depreciation, opportunity cost of capital, all of it. Only then do you see the truth. And the truth is usually ugly enough to change behavior if the person is willing to look at it long enough. That is the final problem. Most people do not want the truth. They want justification. That is why I think the real dividing line in personal finance is not between people who can afford expensive cars and people who cannot. The real dividing line is between people who understand opportunity cost and people who only understand monthly affordability. Those are radically different populations. The monthly affordability person asks, "Can I make the payment?" The opportunity cost person asks, "What is this payment doing to the rest of my life for the next 7 years?" That is the question that saves people, because once you ask it honestly, the answer becomes painful in a useful way. Maybe the truck is still worth it to you. Fine, at least. Then you are choosing the truth. But for most people, if they really saw the full cost, the future investment value of those same dollars, and the career and life flexibility they are sacrificing to support the image, the whole transaction would stop looking like a reward and start looking like a cage. That is what I want people to see. Not that nice vehicles are evil. Not that no one should ever finance a car. Not that comfort or enjoyment are sins. I want them to see the system clearly. The system is built to make the payment feel survivable while making the long-term consequence feel abstract. It sells you a smaller present tense number and hides the full future tense trade. That is how it wins. So if you ask me what the smartest response is, I would say this: buy transportation, not identity. Force every vehicle decision through a total cost filter, not a monthly payment filter. Protect your cash flow like it is sacred, because it is understand that the used reliable car may look less impressive in the driveway, but much more impressive on a future balance sheet. And remember this one line: the person with the older Honda and the growing investment account is often much richer in every way that will actually matter later than the person sitting in the chrome-plated illusion. That is the trap nobody talks about. Not that the payment exists, that it trains you to confuse appearance with progress until the future arrives and ask where all your money went.